ball, and there is an enigmatic and charming figure there, but they're wearing a mask, so you don't know who it is. Somebody comes up to you and says, I think the masked man might be your dad, and you say, that's impossible. I know who my dad is, I do not know who the masked man is, therefore their properties are different, therefore they must be different.
Wrong!
What you think about something is not a property of the thing itself, it is a property of you. Conflating the two is the masked man fallacy, and this is the mistake that Descartes makes. He can doubt his body, and he can't doubt his mind, but that is something to do with him. He hasn't actually established that the things themselves have different properties. To give another example, Lois Lane believes Superman can fly. Lois Lane does not believe Clark Kent can fly. Therefore, Clark Kent and Superman are separate? No. What you think about something is not a property of the thing itself. Furthermore, even if Descartes had established that mind and body were separate, that wouldn't necessarily mean that they are two different substances, res cogitans and res extensa. It could be that mind and body are separate, but that the mind is still, nevertheless, very much part of the physical world. And even if Descartes was totally right, his dualism throws up a whole bunch of questions. For instance, we know that what goes on in our bodies is affected by our brains, and we think the brain has something to do with the mind. So how does a non-physical mind affect a physical brain? How does res cogitans wrap itself around the neurons of a res extensa? How can a non-physical thing causally impact a physical thing? And why do people's minds change depending on what you do to their brains? And I know that your body is separate from mine because they inhabit different bits of space, but my mind seems to go where my body goes. But if it's res cogitans and it doesn't have a location in space, it's no more in my body than it is in yours. So how come I, the subjective seat of my experience, seem to go wherever my body goes? For these reasons, Cartesian dualism is not so popular nowadays. But what do you guys think? Was Descartes onto something here? Are the mind and body separate? And if they are they totally separate substances? Send me your questions, comments, queries, and comebacks underneath the video on Twitter, Facebook, or by email. You can also let me know whether you'd like the next episode to be about Plato's Republic, or do we have individual duties to the environment? Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and you can subscribe to Philosophy Tube using your body to stimulate your mind. Our last episode mixed 18th century Scottish Enlightenment philosophy with Metallica. Let's see what the philosophers had to say about Hume on miracles. Hans Coessen said that all you need to do to prove a miracle is to verify that the effects have happened. I would want to also insist that there be some evidence for a supernatural explanation of those effects. You mentioned the bodies of saints not rotting as a miracle, and whilst a body not rotting can be clearly observed, before I called it a miracle, I'd want to make sure, first of all, that it was really happening, and second of all, that there was no ordinary natural explanation for it. Also, even if there is no evidence for a natural explanation, that still leaves the question open. You'd then need to have some evidence for a supernatural explanation before you called it a miracle, whatever form that supernatural evidence might take. Austin Labonte said that Hume might be throwing the baby out with the bathwater here and saying that certain unlikely but natural events shouldn't be believed in, and gave the example of getting a hole-in-one in the Masters Golf Tournament. Remember though, Hume was an empiricist. I think in the case of the golf tournament, he would say it's more likely that the hole-in-one happened than all the camera crews and witnesses were lying, crucially because a hole-in-one is a natural event, and it's part of the nature of unlikely natural events that they do occasionally happen. Whereas, in the case of a miracle, every second of every day counts as evidence for assuming that the laws of nature are uniform, so you're always going to have more evidence for supposing that a miracle story is false than the miracle story itself will ever have for assuming that the laws of nature are not uniform. Joshua Pearson left a really good comment underneath the Hume episode on this, which explained it all. Go and read that, he really knows what he's talking about. Brontal Music said that Hume is right, but just because miracles aren't real in one sense doesn't mean they're not real in another. Do you want to explain that at all? I mean, it seems like if something doesn't exist, that's incompatible with it existing. Surely things don't exist more or less. You either exist or you don't. Dominic Steenken asked, how can we have evidence for the permanence of the laws of nature? Remember, Hume wasn't saying that we have evidence for assuming that they're permanent, only that we will always have more evidence for supposing that they are uniform than any miracle story could ever have for supposing that they are non-uniform. He wasn't saying that one idea is definitely conclusive, he's saying that we need to weigh the evidence. The weighing of the evidence is the crucial thing. B. Booker 2 said that we could define miracles as natural events, but ones which defy all rational probabilistic interpretation. I was waiting for somebody to fall into that trap, I'm afraid. The problem is that it's part of the nature of unlikely events that they do occasionally happen. So if you say that a miracle is an unlikely event which happens, you're not going to have any way of telling the difference between a genuine miracle and an unlikely event that just happened. So whilst you may have won a small victory by defining miracles as possible, you will never be able to definitively point to a particular event and say for sure that it was a miracle. So, kind of a Pyrrhic victory. That's all I've got time for this week. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!
I believe in miracles. Where you from? You sexy thing.